If you know someone who's having trouble figuring out who they are, or they feel a little lost, or they feel like an outcast or left out, these things may help you be a better support system for them, but it'll also make you be a better support system for yourself. I really believe the closer we get to our authentic self, the more peace of mind and the happier our life will be. Today is a new day. I am Nikki G, your host. Welcome to the Lone Doctrine, a safe space to bridge the gap between your authentic self and your mental health. We are your food for thought exploration station in order to make today better than yesterday. Hello and welcome to another week where we're bridging the gap between you and your best self, creating a safe space for us to become the best we can be. I think I've had a little too much caffeine today. So, welcome back. And if you're new, welcome for the first time. I am so stoked that you are here. Stoked just probably aged me. I am so excited and grateful that you are here. And this month, we've been talking about gender. We've been talking about gender ideas. And if you didn't know, and if you have known, it can be a very confusing topic because, in a nutshell, sex is biological and gender is social. Gender is something that we learn along the way and we assign not just to certain traits within us, but to things around us. We refer to things as more masculine or feminine or more for boys or girls or guys or women. Now the question is this doing us more harm or more good? Sure, I'll give you, sometimes we need something to define itself, and that's okay. But sometimes we need to stay open to the fluidity of life because things change. I mentioned something last week and I've gotten messages about it. And it kind of like blew people's mind. And it was the simple thing as the idea that pink is for girls and blue is for boys is relatively new. It wasn't until like the mid 20th century where we decided to switch it. Meaning, it used to be pink was for boys and blue was for girls. Now, I illustrate this in the simplest sense because that's what it is. It can always change. And what I know, what you know, what we all know may not be the end all. And that's okay. That's life. So today I wanted to explore why gender identities matter and kind of start to learn about a few different ones and how that may correlate to our lives or how it may correlate to someone around us. If you know someone who's having trouble figuring out who they are, or they feel a little lost, or they feel like an outcast or left out, these things may help you be a better support system for them, but it'll also make you be a better support system for yourself. I really believe the closer we get to our authentic self, the more peace of mind and the happier our life will be. So, why does it matter? Why does gender identity and expression matter? Well, according to healthline.com, language and labels are important parts of understanding your gender and knowing how to be affirming and supportive of other people's genders. But they can also be really confusing. There are so many gender terms out there, many of which overlap. Some also have definitions that shift over time or across different sources of information. Thanks to the World Wide Web, the internet, we have more access to the information, the education, and the visual representations of diverse genders. So let's try to bridge the gap. So let's try to bridge the gap by breaking down what many of these terms mean and how to use them. Having a language to communicate will demonstrate the many ways people experience or express or identify their gender, and it allows us to see clearly and understand the entire gender spectrum, including and beyond the traditional two-idea binary gender categories of man and woman. Life is a full spectrum. So, we're all on the same page because a lot of these I'm learning as well. And a lot of these I'm exploring as well. Because as we come into new chapters of our lives, we're all trying to discover what those identities are. And the one thing we all have in common is that we all have some sort of gender identity. Now, we can get into some that are literal, like the acronym AFAB, meaning assigned female at birth. We can do things like agender, someone who doesn't identify with the idea or experiencing having a gender, which we're seeing a lot in our youth, just wanting the freedom to be fluid. How about AMAB, another acronym meaning assigned male at birth? Now, a lot of these you might think just fall into the community of the LGBT+, that's only stuff for them. But again, this is a commonality between us all. You could literally look these up and everyone's going to find something that fits with them. No matter how you identify with your sexual orientation, whoever you love, whether you're a man or a woman or non-binary, whatever it may be. We all have these categories. We all have these pieces of the puzzle. So let's just go through a few ideas. I'm going to just list some off, and again, I'm exploring these right along with you. And sometimes it can be overwhelming because I will admit there's a lot. But people are complex and we're made of many parts. And this is just an easier way to narrow down who we are. And a lot of people need these things to kind of explain why they might be viewed as different. They're challenging these norms of what we've been taught, of this very kind of concrete, rigid, stuck in a box idea of how one should be. And so when someone doesn't fit in there, they're seen as different or weird or outcasts or words I would not like to mention on this podcast or ever. And the idea is if we take a step back and just gain the knowledge of why that person may be that way and realize it's really not all that big of a deal and it makes them who they are, you'll start to see the beauty and you'll start to feel more peace with differences. Imagine if we were all the same, how boring life would be. So as we accept and embrace these differences, life becomes more awesome. So let's go through some together. Let's start with agender. A person who identifies as absent of any gender feelings or affiliation. Remember, A as a prefix means absence of something. So agender equals absence of gender. How about gender nonconforming? Gender nonconforming is an umbrella term that includes anyone or anything that challenges gender expectations. In other words, gender nonconforming people challenge and subvert gender stereotypes and expectations. In some societies, there's a set of expectations, in all societies, that come with each gender. Like women wear pink, there it is again, and men wear blue. But those who identify as gender nonconforming reject the way of thinking entirely. How about cisgender? I hope I'm saying that right. Cis, which is short for cisgender, refers to people whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned with at birth. Interesting how sometimes we push these definitions away, thinking that, oh, that's not me. Gender identities aren't for me. That's for them. But this says it right here. There are still things that are very common and something that may define you better. How about cisette? I hope I'm really saying these correctly. My apologies if I'm not. Again, I am learning as well. I believe this is short for cisgender heterosexual, or someone who is both cis and straight. Straight is not a gender term, it's a sexual orientation. However, it is relevant to gender when combined with the cisgender. And how about transgender? Trans is an abbreviation of transgender and refers to someone whose gender does not align with the sex they were assigned with at birth. Trans is not aligned with what was determined at birth, where cis is aligned with what was determined. A transgender man is someone who was assigned female at birth but has transitioned or is transitioning to expressing a male gender identity. And a transgender woman is someone who was assigned male at birth but has transitioned or transitioning to expressing a female gender identity. And how about genderqueer? Genderqueer refers to someone who enjoys playing with that political and activist sense of experience of expressed gender. A genderqueer person may identify as neither gender, both, or a combination. They do not subscribe to the traditional gender binary. And how about gender fluid? Someone who is gender fluid feels that their gender can change and vary over time. People who are gender fluid find themselves moving between different gender presentations and identifications. They may identify as a man or masculine one day and as a femme, woman, or feminine another day, and move between these expressions of their gender. They may use gender-neutral pronouns such as they, them, and can be non-binary or genderqueer people. I would challenge, just from a personal standpoint, that a lot of us are really gender fluid, that gender does have this overall fluidity. So just keep an open mind. And let's keep going. Non-binary. Non-binary is an umbrella term for people whose gender is not just male or female. And staying on the theme, this word may have different meanings to different people. Non-binary is anyone outside of gender or someone who is transgender or people who don't fall strictly within the binary at all. Someone can be trans, gender fluid, genderqueer, and non-binary all at the same time. That's what I was saying. All of these kind of interweave. And it can be a lot when we first start to explore this, because sometimes when we feel lost, sometimes when we're coming into this new chapter of figuring out who we are, this can be a little confusing because we're just looking for that sense of identity. But just know that all of us fall a little bit here, a little bit there, a lot of it there, a lot of it there, and that's okay. As you're exploring these and you're exploring who you are, start to look into them, but don't feel the pressure of having to have this long list of how you identify. You can find one, you can find none. And everybody's story is important. And the journey along the way is going to have their imperfections, which makes the journey perfect. Now, of course, we're relating all of this to our own personal development in order to find some peace. Because sometimes when we're starting to experience things like sadness and depression and even stress, something is off within us. We're not filling our cup completely, and we're not finding that full sense of self-worth. And when that is, we want to take all these different topics, and I encourage you to go back month to month and start to explore these topics and allow them to create this journey for you in consistently working on yourself. Because although we live in a society that's all about the quick fix, your mental health and your well-being is an everlasting journey. That is a part of life. It's not something you just do one thing and then you're okay. You have to keep it going. Just like you keep up your physicality, hopefully, and we want to remain having a really healthy body, we also want to dedicate ourselves to having a healthy mind. You may think it's not as important, but it actually might be more important. And when we do that, then all these other things come with the exploration and the ease and not the defense. Not that this is weird. I don't know what you're talking about. This is confusing. You're wrong. It's when we have that tension that it actually affects you more than what you're trying to express to others. When we're holding this defense and this hate and this misunderstanding and this entitled attitude of I'm right and you're wrong, the only one it really affects is the person expressing it. So let's take a step back. Let's be open to the idea. You're just taking the time to gain the knowledge, to understand yourself more, and to understand others. Because when we understand others, the world will become a more peaceful place. So go back to the beginning of the month. And next time, we're going to talk about how all these things make us all better people. And until next time, keep fighting the good fight.